Thank you so much. That was Klaus Strunz there, editorial director of CEO, speaking, of course, to Volodymyr Zelenskyy, president of Ukraine. So a warm thank you to him as well for being live with us on what Antonio Costa, the president of the EU Council, said today was literally the most important day on the Brussels map for that topic of EU enlargement. And now it is time to focus on a country whose fate is very linked, in fact, to Ukraine, on Moldova, submitted the candidacy back in 2022, and we're thrilled to have President Maia Sandu with us here physically in Brussels. Come up on the stage. You'll be sitting down with Euronews's EU editor. That's Maria Tadeo. So a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. Well, thank you very much. And welcome to the Europe Conversation. My guest today is Moldova's President, Maia Sandu. Thank you very much for being with us on Euronews. Of course, when you run for the election, and you clearly won that election in very difficult circumstances, a choice was very clear. Whoever voted for Maia Sandu was voting for Europe, and it was voting to join the European Union. The obvious question may be, perhaps it seems obvious to you, but why is this such an existential question for your country?
Well, first of all, because Moldova wants to continue to be a democratic country, wants to be part of the free world. And of course, because of the security threats that we have been experiencing, because of the hybrid war that we have been experiencing, especially since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So because we want to be part of the free world, and the membership of EU would allow us to achieve that.
One of the questions, obviously, when it comes to enlargement is that you wish to join, the EU wants to take you in, but there's hurdles in between, and that can get extended, and it becomes very difficult. What is the concern for you if this process doesn't move fast enough? Because I'm sure you think about this at night.
Well, of course, the first question is for us, because we have now an excellent political opportunity. We have significant popular support, but also we have significant commitment in all state institutions to implement the EU reforms, and it would be a pity to lose this time. But also, you know, we won the battle this time at the previous 3 elections, but it doesn't mean that Russia is going to give up on Moldova. And if we want more security in the region, if we want more security for Europe, but also for Ukraine, we need to make sure that we don't lose time in Moldova and we consolidate our country and our democracy.
So to put this in very crude terms, if you don't join the European Union, do you believe there is a threat to the sovereignty of your country? And ultimately, this leaves you totally at the mercy of Russia.
Of course. You know, it's not easy. We have, in the last 12 months, we had 2 national elections and a referendum, and we have seen an unprecedented influence, external influence from Russia. It was not easy for us to deal with so many challenges, but we knew that Europe is helping us, is next to us, and that we have an objective to become a EU member state. If we don't deliver in the next 3 years, we have the presidential elections in 3 years and then parliamentary elections, then what's going to be the message to the people? Because you might have the situation that the government has delivered, and we have seen even in today's report, I haven't seen the report, but I've seen some statements, including by Commissioner Kos, that Moldova did manage to show significant progress. So if you deliver at home, but you don't see progress on behalf of EU, then, of course, this creates significant risks for Moldova and for the rest of the countries in the region.
And you mentioned the report that was put out by the European Commission with the recommendations, of course. They say that you're making huge progress, again, in difficult circumstances, and they also say you're ready to open all clusters in November. The obvious question is, why has this not been done before? It's almost the end of the year.
That's a question to the EU. We have been ready since February to open the negotiations on the first cluster, and now EU says that we can open all the clusters. And I do understand that there are all kinds of solutions, but EU also needs to have a timetable to take a decision, a deadline to take a decision on this. Otherwise, they can discuss, you know, for a long time.
And I have to ask you a follow-up question because some believe, of course, in Brussels that the concern is not so much Moldova, the issue, but is Ukraine. And many look at the Moldovan bid and the Ukrainian bid as joint bids, as twins. You applied almost at the same time. Is that how you see it?
Well, the documents say that it's a merit-based approach, and we do believe in a merit-based approach, and it should be both for Moldova and Ukraine and for the rest of the countries. As we could see in the reports, both countries are ready to move to the next steps. So it's now really up to the EU to adopt a decision and to move forward.
And on that point, however, of course, is the elephant in the room in Brussels. Just a final point on this. The issue with the clusters and the negotiation is because, in a way, Moldova is now in the cross battle between Ukraine and Hungary. There's a veto along the way. Many look at it as a joint bid. The two need to move together, but Ukraine has serious problems now moving forward because of this veto. Is there a way that this can be solved? Is there an overcoming? Would you be okay with that?
There are solutions, but again, these are to be taken by the EU member states and by the EU institutions. It's not easy, but if the EU is a little bit more creative and if EU wants to solve this issue, I'm sure it can solve it.
And then, of course, we have to talk briefly about the election campaign, because what happened in your country, and it has been documented, it's an unprecedented interference in an election. Now that there's been time to settle after the election took place, what is the sense that you perceive? What are the threats that you see moving on forward? And again, is there something that you learned from this campaign and this election, which I repeat, it's not the only one, but again, it put the focus on there is interference going on in European elections?
Well, it's easy in Moldova to see Russia's interference because it's been brutal and most of the citizens have seen it. There were many dimensions, of course, the disinformation and manipulation and trying to threat the people with the war that if you vote for EU, then what is happening today to Ukraine is going to happen to you. Attempts to discredit the Moldovan state and the Moldovan authorities. Attempts to organize violent protests, the illegal financing of political parties and campaigns, and even attempts to buy votes. So the influence was so brutal that everybody could see it. In other countries, in EU countries, of course, Russia cannot do all the things that it is doing in Moldova, but the influence can be also very damaging, and for the people not to see it, because when it's about manipulation of information and disinformation, it's much more difficult to see it. In our case, what helped, and we have learned the lesson of last year's elections, was prevention and exposure. The state institutions worked very hard to follow the money from January 1st until the day of the elections, to sanction those who were using Russian money in the elections to finance political parties, their campaigns, or attempts to buy votes. Also, the independent media in Moldova did a very good job by exposing how Russia was hiring people for their troll farms and how they're producing this disinformation content and distributing it. So it was a whole of society effort, but again, it was easier for us to make people aware of these risks, and then people knew that what was at stake. It's more difficult in countries where this influence by Russia is not that brutal.
And President, of course, with all due respect, many would say this is not really new. This back from the Soviet playbook. If there's a way to interfere, they would try to do that. The issue now, and perhaps why it's magnified, it's because the West is not being strong enough. In your view, is the West being weak? Is there an issue with the leadership?
Well, I do believe that for a long time EU didn't take seriously Russia's danger. And I do believe that now the biggest problem is with the online disinformation, because we do have regulations of the audiovisual, but what happens online, and I'm talking about the inauthentic accounts, what is not genuine people's views, what is amplified, again, with money coming from Russia. This is the most damaging part, and I think everybody should take it seriously.
Can I ask a question which was not really at all something that I planned on asking, but now that you mentioned the digital and the things that you see on social media, I remember the Vice President of the United States said, if your democracy can be unsettled by a bunch of TikToks, maybe it's that your democracy is not that strong at all. He said that at the Munich Security Conference. Is that something that you think it's fair, or you go, actually, no, what we're seeing now, it's unprecedented. You've never seen a country like Moldova, small country, dealing with this amount of pressure.
Again, when this is genuine, when it's a genuine dialogue of people online, that's one thing. But in Moldova, we had like an example when BBC infiltrated one of these troll farms, and they accounted for 100 accounts on TikTok, which distributed videos which reached 55 million, or there were 55 million views in a country of 2.4 million people. So I'm talking about inauthentic account and amplified content using illegal money. This is where we need to look into, because this has nothing to do with democracy.
And I want to go back into the specifics of the process of enlargement, because the Commission is saying, and for some, this is basically around the corner, 2028, you blink and we'll be in that year. You're ready to close the negotiations. You could be in a position to do that. But how do you do that so fast in 2 years when we've seen the real difficulties? I mean, we're in November. The clusters are not really moving. How is that going to change in the next 2 years?
Well, we have shown that we are ready and we can do a lot of work in a short period of time. And we are very committed, and we understand that there is a lot that we still need to do. But we also want to see the same determination on the part of the EU to find the solutions. In the past, EU, every time the enlargement was happening, EU had to come up with unorthodox decisions, and they've managed to do it. So it's really about the creativity, but also of the commitment of the EU to find the solutions.
You know, that's a perfect segue